Welcome back. We're still watching Daybreak on this 15th day of August 2023. A very important day as the country marks 1 year since the conclusion or not of the presidential election, at least at the Bomas of Kenya. It was on this day 1 year ago. But we were talking about the allocation of resources, and I had seen a hand. Walter, you wanted to say something. I don't know what provoked you.
What provoked me was the line of thought that Mheshimiwa was advancing. That because of the handshake, then he lost out on property. Yeah. And I think that is the kind of us versus them mentality that has brought us to where we are currently. And my submission earlier was that government should be for all of us. We should not see government that because then they felt that they voted for President Uhuru, that they should have then had access to all the state resources at the expense of everyone else. Mm-hmm. So then it should not be that because there was handshake, which for the first time there was a semblance of unity in this country, that everybody felt that we are one and joined by the corners of the nation. That should have been the spirit that should have been carried forward, that we have an election, but we are one nation. I think that is the spirit of our constitution, and that is the spirit envisioned even in our independence. But some look at where we are today. We have innocent Kenyans going out to exercise their democratic right to picket, which Mheshimiwa wants to interpret the constitution in a manner that suits the thinking of the side that he believes in, that picketing should be defined in a certain way. Yet when people go out to, harmless people, what do we see happening? Guys are gunned down at point blank. We had burials the other weekend of tens of young innocent Kenyans happening 1 year down the line. I mean, is this the kind of what was promised for the hustlers? Is this the kind of development that you want to see? Is this the kind of unity progress that you're making several years since our independence? So I think the best thing to do is then...
But do you also agree that there's a problem in how demonstrations are organized in this country, on the side of demonstrators?
I think the bigger problem is on the side of the government that handles demonstrators.
Oh, fine, and I hear you. And it is on record that there has been a bit of excessive force. But on the side of demonstrators?
I think the role of a demonstrator and the people that organize demonstrations, one is to notify, give due notice that you're going to have a demonstration on this stretch, and this is the purpose of the demonstration. And from my assessment, I think that has been pretty well done in the last recent times that we've had demonstrations. In fact, there was a time that, I think it was in Kibra, that people thought that there's going to be violence. And we saw the protesters themselves helping protect businesses and interests.
But, Walter, have you seen people lighting bonfires on roads? Have you seen protesters pelting stones at...
Before the arrival of the police?
At the security officers?
Rarely do you find protesters, from my observation, rarely do you find protesters engaging in violence before attack and before provocation by the police, from the few that I have observed. And so then...
But you have seen them behave in such a manner?
Yes, I have seen protests turn violent, especially once there's engagement with the police. My perception and interpretation of the law that permits picketing is that the police should then serve to protect, guide these citizens, because then there's also the element of infiltration. We've seen where people, we saw some cases where some buses were burnt, from nowhere, to try and paint a certain picture. So then it's incumbent upon the state to ensure that we protect these citizens who are picketing, who are exercising their democratic right from such infiltration.
I think, Sam, we have an obligation to tell the nation the truth when we speak here. Because trying to say that a bus was banned to try and depict the wrong picture, who banned the bus, first of all? Secondly, how do you call something that is violent and with weapons, how do you call it peaceful? Thirdly, why do you light a fire before the police arrive? Why do you amass stones? Why do you carry them in pickups? I mean, before the police are there. So is that what the Constitution is prescribing? The Constitution is very clear, peaceful and unarmed. I have never seen one in this country.
Shage, we need to wind up on this, but I want to understand, especially when it comes to sharing of resources, because he says that because of the handshake of 2018, March 9th, his region missed out on crucial development programs, and they shifted to another region that didn't vote for the president. First of all, is that the right way of doing politics? But also, where is Parliament in all this? Because they are the representatives of the people.
I think we first and foremost, I think that's not the right notion, because a budget essentially nowadays in the new constitution is formulated and passed in Parliament. And the process of getting projects done and costed is done within that budget statement that is that is brought and passed in Parliament. Now, if the executive, for one reason or the other, decides to depart from the process or the agreed budget statement that they have already passed, then it is upon Parliament to oversight the same. Because if you look at what happens, and the beauty about devolution is that this same structure is now devolved at the counties. When we pass, this is the budget that is passed in the counties, if the governor, for whatever reason, is also not keen on following the same process, then that's where you get the hula baloos, and that's where you get the strife between assemblies and the executive. In the national level, executive and legislature, there has not been a very clear line, especially on issues of strength of structure and strength of everyone's role. And I think Parliament collectively needs to decide and make a decision that in issues of development, we can, from issues of partisan positions and whatever, we agree. But on issues common to Mwananchi and common to every ward at a go, let us agree that we are going to be very strong in our oversight role. And that's what they've done, and it's not something new. That's what they do when it comes to CDF. You know, they do not take, they don't leave any stone unturned, and they push the president and push executive until CDF is adopted and given money. So in the same way, they need also to agree on issues of development. That is one area. Number two is that even with the strength of development, we need also to agree that money will never and resources will never be enough. Where should be the source, the point of source of launching projects? In my view, it should be counties. And that's why bulk of the roads, bulk of, trading activities, agriculture, health is devolved. That's where the center should be. And then the national should now be strengthening counties to be able to develop. Because the road that Mheshimiwa is even talking about, it would be crazy for an executive at his county not to attend to that road 5 years, because it will mean his re-election or not. But you see, from a national point of view, you can sidestep and also use another area and still be elected. But when it comes to the counties, every area is important for you, because you miss that area, then it means a re-election. So I think we need to relook, and I'm happy that we're also going to have a discussion about devolution. We need to relook how development, the centerpiece of development and the action point should be at the county level, whereby everyone is talking the same language. These roads affect almost everyone within that county, and national government should now, remove themselves a lot when it comes to issues of development and leave them to the counties. Because at the counties, and the devolution in the last 10 years will show you, there's a lot of spread. Even the roads that no one would have thought about, the health centers that no one thought about, and the strength and of these structures, if it's strengthened well, then the national now becomes an area of oversighting how the funds are being allocated at the counties.
Okay, interesting. And Kirago, as you transition, tell me about it, because you're able to observe at least the rollout of devolution. Have we made progress in especially moving away? You see, he's talking about the president had a lot of power last time, and in determining what project is not implemented, not even about what is implemented. But are we seeing replication of the same at the counties? But how well are we doing, especially in bringing development to the people?
Well, I think it is good to see the devolution, first of all, in a long-term perspective, not just in a short-term perspective. We have just had it for 10 years. I think when devolution came, part of the issue was to address the issue of marginalization, the kind of situation where some people felt discriminated in terms of development, and that they had stagnated. In the context also of improving service delivery, that was, I think, the other very important aspect of it. But also very importantly, also in terms of, from a democratic point of view, giving the people the sense of local empowerment, local sense of self-governance, self-determination in terms of moving forward in terms of transforming their own societies. And I would say, I think on all those 3 counts, we have made very good progress. We have very well organized county governments in place everywhere in this country within a space of 10 years. It's not easy because I'm sure those who know about organizations, you don't get an organization just spring overnight and it is there and it is working. I would say also it is true that in terms of marginalization, I think now most communities, especially those who felt that they were being excluded from development. I think many of the communities appreciate devolution very much in terms of the things which they are doing in their own counties, you know, whether it is in service delivery or in anything else. Obviously, in terms of improving service delivery, in terms of development, in terms of in terms of addressing issues such as unemployment and so forth, we have a long way to go. But what I would say is that we have learned our lessons, and I think even as when you look at the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, it is taking the lessons of experience in terms of where we are. And I can only say that I think now we are in a good place to really move forward in the context that if I look at the national level, we have leadership which is committed to devolution in a way which, and with passion. With a passion which I had not seen in the past, and you saw it even in terms of what the President William Ruto said during his inaugural speech. It was clear that we are in a new dispensation in terms of commitment to devolution. I want to say that, therefore, we are in a situation where we now know the challenges, we now know the pitfalls, we now know the misses. And given what I see from His Excellency the President and his cabinet, and from what I see in terms of the governors themselves, in terms of how well they, I mean, I can compare the current governors in their commitment with what I saw of the governors in the previous two epochs, and I can say that I think we are in a good place to go in terms of making devolution, in terms of consolidating it, deepening it, and in that sense, therefore, do much better in terms of service delivery to the people and in terms of addressing the issues that confront the people.
Interesting. And for you, Walter, have you seen any difference in terms of how governments roll out programs? Well, this is almost a self-assessment, but anyway, just make an attempt. In Siaya, are you seeing replication of what Honorable Kanyude is talking about here, such that there are certain regions that do not benefit because of politics, especially if you look at the first 2 terms of devolution?
Thank you, Sam. Let me start by saying that, picking from where the chairman has left, one of the key takeaways from devolution really was the sense of bringing development closer to the people and cushioning them from potential discrimination at the national level. Previously, certain regions could not get certain things because of perceived political standing. And that is one thing that devolution has adequately cured, so that today, at SIA, we can sit back and be sure, like any other part of the country, that we'll get our equitable share of resources. Having said that, then, in SIA, what has then happened is that under the leadership of our governor, Governor James Orengo, who during his campaign designed a manifesto. It's called Nyalore Manifesto. In fact, the government instead is called Nyalore Government, which then is to connote possibility of, unyoking our people from entanglement, unyoking our people from the burdens of economic despair and those kind of things. And how then that has happened is the governor has translated his manifesto and integrated with the CIDP, that is the County Integrated Development Program, together with the ADP and all those plans, that then leads to the budget. This then speaks to equity of all the wards. In SIA, we have 30 wards. And then the endeavor is made so that all wards have an equitable share of development. And indeed, there's been a lot of progress over time. In the sector, for instance, in water, where I work, when devolution started way back in 2010, before 2013, the benchmark in terms of access to clean and safe water was barely 45%. Today in Siaya, our rating confirmed by the regulators is that up to 58% of the population can have access to clean and safe water. The governor has put a very strategic plan, and we are working together so that in the next 3-4 years, that percentage can rise to 70% of people accessing clean and safe water. And water is a basic human right in terms of and supporting health, supporting livelihood.
So when was this 45%?
That was in 2010. That was pre-devolution, as at the start of devolution.
Are we taking too long to double it?
We are not taking too long. One, because what it means in terms of access is being able to get to clean and safe water within a radius of 1 kilometer. And I think that is pretty much progress, because that is what WHO and other international bodies put as a benchmark. And the kind of infrastructure that goes into putting water infrastructure, the investment that goes into water, the abstraction, the distribution, the channels, is quite heavy. And then that also then leads us to the thinking about resources. How much resources are we able to deploy down there to be able to do these kind of capital investments? But that notwithstanding, I agree that we've seen a lot of progress in devolution, not just in water. In health, for instance, in Siaya County today, which is a priority sector, the government has intentionally invested in what is called community health workers, supporting them so that at the grassroots level, access to health is improved by building a number of dispensaries, equipping health facilities, all those basic access, so that access to healthcare is highly improved, together with a cohort of other services. Just to quickly mention, for instance, pre-devolution, the ECD, the early childhood development, was one of the highly neglected areas and facets of development. Today, if you come to Siaya, for instance, just recently, about 602 ECD teachers were employed on very conducive terms, so that then they're able to give their services and support the development of children. And so in terms of quantifiable progress, quantifiable development, there are many things that we can see in terms of creation of employment opportunities down in the village, in terms of emergence of urban areas, towns, so that we even have a decline in intense rural-urban migration, so that people finishing graduating from schools do not necessarily see the capital, Nairobi, as the only avenue where you have to come and look for jobs. So I think in terms of those kind of takeaways, then there's a lot to celebrate about devolution if we can enhance and make it better going forward.
Okay, interesting. For you, Dr. Kanyuthia, the pace at which devolution has moved, what would be your comment about it? I know there are all manner of concerns that resources are not sufficient, but with the little there is, what is the impact that you've seen that we would never get without this mode of governance?
I think the strongest impact is in the employment sector, getting people jobs. I think devolution has done very well in that because every governor will have a few more people employed. What I don't know is whether that's the way to go, because resources are supposed to be for development. Why do they employ? Because of politics. The same thing, equitability. We didn't have this governor comes from this section. We didn't have a lot of our people in this government. And therefore, in trying to stiff for their voices, they go ahead and employ a few more people. So we are using a lot more resources in personal emoluments than development in terms of proportion. If you compare the county government with the little resources that go through CDF, you see a lot more of CDF projects sticking out, and a lot more of county governments not really, being as much visible as you probably could say. Now, there are several issues that county and devolution was supposed to achieve, quite a number of objectives. And in most of them, we are seeing a little bit of lacks in terms of the development sphere. You may talk about the development. And it all has to do with the socioeconomic interpretation of a county in what do they call socioeconomic development as a county. Which areas have they focused on? Where do they want to channel resources that they get from the national government? How much of their own resources are they generating? And what is the rationale in their allocation? If I may look at, for instance, agriculture. How many counties are seriously supporting agriculture as a means of, livelihood support, and also as a growth promoter, because agriculture is a growth enhancer. Most of the people are engaged in agriculture. How much of the county resources actually go there, and which, subsectors of agriculture are they promoting? What is the identification process? I mean, how many have they identified, and how are they actually making sure they work? Of course, they are enablers into making sure agriculture works and others. Now, if I may look at a lot more on the positive side, I would say that devolved resources have achieved faster development for the regions than probably how it was before, because there's a lot more focus on the issue of self-determination and the decision on what needs to be done. I think people are getting more of services, better services with the counties. We are seeing counties, the towns are modernizing. We are having better kiosks now. We are having cabros all over. And we are seeing a lot of better markets being developed, which probably would not have happened under a centralized system. So counties have a huge positive. But on the other hand, I think counties need to think of bigger mega projects. There was that thinking in forming the regional clusters of development, where several counties are merging together to form a development, to have a development focus. That can help them in industrialization if they really focus on that. But micro enterprising and what they call cottage industries, really, in my very considered opinion, is not a development model that will take us to where we want to go as a country in the very near future, because we are trying to do experiments instead of assisting people in helping. There's a county I like citing sometimes, the Makueni County, previously under Professor Kibuza Kimwana. Kibuza Kimwana, first of all, supported fruit farming, the mango, and then did aggregation centers, and then did processing. That's the model that we should use as a country. Look at where do you have the comparative advantage. What can you produce easily and cheaply? What can you amass? How can you now transform this to keep it for longer use? And also, how can you also develop it or prepare it for faraway use and for long-term shelf life? That way, you'll create employment within what you are doing. But we see counties focusing a lot more on employment within the county and not generating jobs with what resources they have in terms of turning around the raw materials into finished products. And probably that is why the national government is important to be there for bigger thinking, more international relations kind of perspective. Like the current government is talking about industrial parks, where we have aggregation centers, and then we have large storage chains, and then we have transformation centers where we shall identify commodities and promote these commodities for transformation. When you transform, you create jobs for everybody, very many people along the value chain. Those who make sure that the product is done, those who qualify the product is ready for processing, those who collect, transport, those who transform, those who prepare even material, those who advertise for this product, transport, and all other issues. So we create so many jobs. That is where we need to go as counties. And in my very considered opinion, devolution conferences should be about the milestones counties have created vis-a-vis, so that you can put the laggards into, thinking a lot more of transforming the lives of their people through mega, industrialization approach.
That is interesting. But on the question of creating employment, are you talking about the political appointees that the governor needs? Is it the advisors, the aides, or actually in the public service of the county? In the public,
if you look at counties, in the public service of the county, of course, there are those who are permanent kind of employees. But there are those that counties can change, can vary over time. They can lay over a few, they can include others, they can transfer others here and there. So when you transfer to engage another person, you are creating more cost for the county. And that takes resources earmarked for development into therefore paying salaries. So I think counties should focus a lot more in creating opportunities and therefore absorbing anybody else who may come into those opportunities that they have created, other than using resources from the national government from the exchequer, their share, their equitable share, into employing more people. That, to me, I think is not really the way it should go.
And just hold on. And when you talk about industrial parks that are being implemented, I thought I heard that the national government will finance, but also the county government will also do the same. Yeah. Is that the right model? It should be in entirety the function of a county?
It is a function of a county that has support from the national government. The initiative comes from the national government, through experience, lessons learned from elsewhere, that most of the other countries which actually grew went that particular process. Also, declaration of economic zones is another option for transformation and creation of employment, which we need to embrace. So when it comes to the industrial parks, the thinking around industrial parks will help a great deal in ensuring that a county focuses a lot more on their potential for growth. They do internal examination, re-examination, and identifying and multiplying what they can be able to produce as a county, promoting this, transforming this, creating jobs in the process. And also keeping. One of the other problems we have as a country is the losses. The post-harvest losses in most of, whether it is serious dry products or wet products.
Okay.
Wet products will go up to 60%, dry products go up to 40%.
Okay.
So these losses are loss of big.
I hear you, Dr. Let me hear from Shega first. Specifically on how well we've done in separating roles and where we miss it, because there are a lot of programs, including, what was the name? MES, Medical Equipment Scheme, that was started off by the national government but paid for by the counties. Have we empowered now the devolved structures to be in a position to make the best of decisions that they think are best without a lot of the overbearing nature of the national government? I
think that we're in the right time to have that conversation, because I think what is actually Schedule 4 of the Constitution, Part 1 says what is national, Part 2 says what is county functions. All the ones that are supposed to be done by counties, I think they should be allowed to be done by the counties. What national government should be focusing on is maybe policy area and maybe issues of standardization. Mheshimiwa talks about aggregation areas and whatever, and it's good. But then again, who is best able to come up with what is important for those specific areas is the counties. Even in terms of, as you mentioned, the medical equipment scheme, the county understands which area, which hospital is able to accommodate whatever kind of development or whatever kind of infrastructure for their next level. Because the bulk of medical issues are actually at the, the lower level, the outpatient level. How are we doing that with regards to even the sourcing of medical equipment and also drugs? And then at whatever level, maybe the level 4, 5, the national government comes in to standardize what is a proper level 5 in all the areas that they're looking at. So I think that should be the conversation. Number 2, there is a huge focus on recurrent expenditures over the developmental. When it comes to recurrent, that's where the jobs you're saying are. To that extent, if you look at the score of a county government, and all of them across board, in absorbing the recurrent expenditures, are really over 90%. If you look at the same county in regards to development expenditure, all of them are below 20%. And I think that should be the focus when we're talking about devolution. Why is it our absorption rate of issues that are very dear to Mwananchi and dear to the Kenyans? There's a lot of slag. We are very slow in how to ensure that the projects are done. And then number 2, even the ones that are done, we now have problems of pending bills. We are very quick, again, in giving them the projects to be done. But once they are procured, once the companies come and the contractors come and start doing the jobs, it is a song being paid. So that is a conversation that we need to start and stem it before it becomes a national disaster, because that's where it's going. So many people get auctioned. So many people get into financial problems that are bringing strife even to families in terms of collaterals that they did to get the monies that they have. So I think that area needs to be looked at very carefully. Finally, there should be also a conversation, because there's the summit where the president meets the governors. There should be a very clear demarcation of what is the national doing and what can the county governments be doing, and what support. Mheshimiwa is talking about mega projects. Government should be able to support or guarantee these counties to form and be able to do projects that are cross-cutting against, counties that are more than 1, 2 projects that go beyond that. Okay. If we do, we've been having EPZ, the Special Economic Zone 1 in the country. If we multiply them to 290 constituencies, what will be the economic benefit of it, vis-a-vis maybe having 10 to start with, and maybe having selected areas and be able to push it to that direction? So what do you propose? Because the government has said, the national government has said that it will match the contribution, or it will give a contribution and the counties will match. What would be your proposal in going about that? The proposal would be, let these things be driven by a very good study that shows if the areas that we've looked at, there is enough work to be able to be generated by these counties or the economic activity around that area, preferably even maybe 4 or 5 counties joined up together, if we put a proper infrastructural whatever in that area, how is it going to be supported so that work is not just an 8 to 5 kind of work, but we generate work that even can go around, you know, at whole 24 hours? Because our biggest problem is unemployment. If we're able to sort there's no way you're going to cure unemployment without some form of industrialization. And the industrialization is about value addition. So if whatever county is able to develop in terms of, first of all, identifying areas, agricultural or something that they can manufacture, something that they can put more value to, and then something that they can look for export for, or at least cross-cutting within the counties. That should be the starting point. But if we do not go that direction, well, yes, we'll have, like they call them, very many nice projects that are happening, but the uptake also becomes, it takes a while. And because Kenyans also want to see development, they want to see, yeah, this project is started and it is launched and they're happy. But in terms of the actual benefit, I think it needs to be better organized and also staggered in a way, because nowadays, within a 5-year period, a county executive needs to have started, implement, thought about it, start, implement, and possibly complete. Because when now we have these very high attrition rates, when another government comes in, they are very slow to take up projects that were from a former somebody they were competing with, and that I think is a problem.
All right. Just before I get to you, Mr. Kirago, just a clarification. You said that the governor has come up, has now sort of married the CIPD, the County Integrated Development Program, CIDP, with his manifesto. This CIDP, is it what he inherited from the previous government, or it's a new one?
Thank you, Sam. The CIDP it has a lifespan of 5 years. Every 5 years, a CIDP is done. And so when governor goes into campaign and when politicians go into campaign, of course, they have a contract with the people. They make commitments. And if they are honest and good politicians, then they have a way of following through on the commitments so that they become deliverables. And so what then governor did is to, because then you cannot implement political statements, but you can implement plans and strategies that are captured in the CIDP. So
this is a new one?
This is a new one, yes.
That's what I'm asking for, but I'll get back to you. For you, Mr. Kirago, so you sit in an institution that is supposed to help the summit and help the Council of Governors, I believe, especially also in advising on functions, the Schedule 4 of the Constitution. How well are we doing? Because I remember during the campaigns, the president told Kenyans that he was going to ensure that all functions that should be devolved will be devolved and the resources accompanying them will follow them. How well are we doing this at a time that we continue to start off new programs, including those of industrial parks, those of markets, never mind that it is the work of the county to promote trade in the county? How are we doing?
Okay, I think in answering that question, let me bring a broader context. I have a sense that most Kenyans, including the elite, both at the national and county government level, and even the public, including, for example, therefore the mass media, you haven't taken enough time to understand how a devolved system of governance was supposed to work. It's not a federal system. But in that sense, therefore, the Constitution is very clear, and it says very clearly how the 2 levels of government, for them to succeed, for the county governments to succeed, and for the national government to succeed, the 2 levels of government must work through consultation, cooperation, and coordination for them to succeed. And even, for example, the Honorable Member of Parliament talks here about agriculture. Why we have not succeeded in agriculture, and I totally agree with you, that actually if this country is to be transformed, we need to transform agriculture. It's because the 2 levels of government have not sufficiently consulted, cooperated, and coordinated in how we are going to transform agriculture in this country. Because again, the county governments have a responsibility, but also implementation of the agricultural programs that will transform this country and directed by a policy which is a national level government. Therefore, it is a continuum from policy, strategy, to implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. Therefore, every one of them, the national government has a role to play in transformation of agriculture at the county level, because it is responsible for the entire country in terms of policy and strategy. And at the same time, then it also has a problem if it tries to implement what the county governments are supposed to be. So they exist in a continuum. And therefore, it is only through a process by which the two levels really know how to work together, not in terms of general political statement, but in terms of at the sector level, agreeing this is how we are going to transform agriculture in the country. And this is the policy we are adopting. As the national government develops that policy, it doesn't develop it in, from ivory towers. It develops it in consultation with the county governments. They agree the strategies which are going to transform the country. They agree that we are going to need agriculture extension to do better. We are going to do better in terms of agricultural inputs, and that the different counties are going to do the following for us to achieve what we need to achieve in terms of, therefore, agricultural transformation, value addition, industrialization. So all these things require actually the two levels of government to work very well together. And that is very important to be understood by the country and at both levels of government. Now, the problem comes when some technocrats or political people somewhere decide to do things without consulting the other level. And the county governments, of course, the county governments need the national government to be on the leadership level in terms of convening all of them to agree what needs to happen for the country. Now, to your question, I mean, I could take much longer. Let me not take much longer. But please let us understand that the national government will not succeed to transform agriculture in Kenya without the county governments being at the table, at the policy level, and agreeing on it as a nation. And at the same time, the county governments need to appreciate that the national government has an important role to play in terms of transforming agriculture for the country. Now, in that regard, let me say, on that basis, and given what Honorable Mwaura said about Schedule 4 of the Constitution, that schedule did not mean that everything is absolute, that one group goes to do policy somewhere else and another group goes to do agriculture somewhere else. It meant they have to work together. But in that regard, I can say we got problems because we got people in the national government, and that is part of the tragedy over the past 10 years, and that's why we have not done better than we would have done in terms of service delivery and development, in the situation where some functions of county governments in terms of implementing agriculture, health services, and so forth, then the national government institutions focused on implementation of programs instead of focusing on bringing the country together to agree on policy, to agree on strategy, and so forth. What we have done recently, to cut a long story short, is that since His Excellency President William Ruto announced himself at his inauguration that he's going to transfer all devolved functions to county governments, we have worked with all sectors, at the national level, we have worked with the PSs and their teams. We have worked with the county governments. We have worked with the Council of Governors. We have worked with the National Treasury, with the Attorney General's Office, Kenya Law Reform Commission, all kinds of people, even the Office of the President, to clearly identify what elements of those functions are still being done by national government, by national government entities, and that they now need to be transferred. And we have a whole bundle of them, and we're just waiting for, shall we say, endorsement of them by the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council and the summit, and then we do implementation. When we move those functions, we are also going to move the resources from the national government at the moment, which need to go to the county governments.
Do you have an estimate of how much of the resources you're talking about?
We have done that, but as I said, it is good that we have a conversation at the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council and at the summit before we make this, because we have, at the technical level, there is consensus. We have technical level, meaning national government people, county government people, and the auxiliary intergovernmental institutions have agreed at the technical level what functions need to move, what resources are in contention for the transfer of those functions.
Okay, I know you don't want to get into the resources side, but currently the Exchequer releases, or is to release 385 billion shillings to the counties.
Yes.
If you had to look at those spending functions, what proportion is it to this 385?
Let's say it will be substantial. it will be substantial. It could be 50%, could be 60% more than what is provided at the moment. But I think the best is, we don't want to create false expectations. Okay. It's going to be a conversation because, again, it is not a one-off thing. The 385 is done and it's a one-off thing.
Yeah.
But here we are talking about, we are going to do this without disrupting ongoing programs, ongoing exercises. So it is going to be a process. But we can say there's going to be substantially more resources going to the county governments as they assume more responsibility for the devolved functions.
I hear you. Let's hear you, Walter, especially on the practical experience that you've had at the county implementing some of these programs. What are the challenges?
Thank you, Sam. Before I get to that, I could be wrong, but I think I have read reports attributed to the organization chaired by the chairman here, indicating that up to about 272 billion worth of functions that should be devolved are still held at the national government. I was interested in particularly for the water sector, and the report says that 58 billion worth of services and worth of functions are still held at the national government, yet these are functions that are clearly devolved. On the element of agriculture, which I think has been fairly prosecuted on this table today, again, we've seen counties implement things. In my county, for instance, our governor spearheaded a program. Currently, up to 234,000 acres of land has been put under mechanized farming. We've had agriculture plowing, we've had certified seeds, fertilizer support, and the kind of bumper harvest that people are experiencing in SEA today is directly attributable to that kind of intervention. So then the next question is the value chain. If we have earned this much of maize, for instance, in my county, where do we take them next? We were treated, the county was made aware a while back by none other than the CS of Agriculture, that the country intended to produce maize in Zambia and then bring to Kenya. I then feel at a loss how then that ties with our production in the rural, in our counties, with that kind of policy. I think then what Chairman says is important, that we have a good flow of policy, so that intervention at the county level are not then hampered or contravened by interventions at the national level.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. There are two interventions. Let me begin with you, Dr. Kanyuthia. You're also the chairperson of the Agriculture Committee.
Yes, I chair the committee at the National Assembly. Now, two things. Number one, I want to agree totally with the chairman of the Intergovernmental Technical Committee on what the Intergovernmental
Relations.
Yes.
Technical committee.
Technical committee.
Because for you to change that.
Because that is the committee. That is the committee which should actually guide how the two levels of government should work. And I want to emphasize, we are talking about two levels of one government. We have a unitary government which has devolved units. That's really important for Kenyans to understand. We don't have 48 governments. Because
that's a very contentious issue.
It's a very contentious. The thinking sometimes is that we hire in government, even counties. And I want to say this in terms of, with an example of devolved functions and those that are left at the national level. If I may cite a few, that is, few of the functions left at the national level. Research. Research is not a regional issue. Research is a national issue, and research is coordinated at the global level at the international research organs. In agriculture, we call it Consultative Group on Agricultural Research for Development. So that this particular research group thinks about the global research, and then it permeates into the regional research, and then to the country research, and therefore to the local level. So we have technologies, innovations, and management practices developed at those levels. And then the same, therefore, goes to the further to support the capacity building, because capacity building is about innovations and technology. So that cannot be handled at the county again, because county is not doing research. So they are related. On the other hand, we look at the international trade. We have due recognition of competent agencies, and the competent agencies are per country. And that's an issue that counties really mistake sometimes. And we have task force, why can't we even sell our coffee out there? We have to sell through the recognized agency of Kenya must say this is good for human consumption. And that's the only recognized agency in the world. So if anybody else says it is good for human consumption, they will not recognize, they will not buy. Right. So that is why national government is important and county government is important as a production unit. So county governments are so key in terms of making sure that it happens. National governments are key in terms of relating with others, being able to have these international relations going on, and also the policy issue, the policy, the strategy. Policies may not be done at the local level. They are all-encompassing, because the growth strategy for Kenya must encompass every part of Kenya, and it must actually take into context what is proposed by the CIDP, and at the end of the day, what has been achieved through the CIDPs. Okay. So it is an integrated system, which we all need to be thinking about. I want to hear to support him on one issue. If there is any function which is left at the national level, and which is actually suffering, it should be taken back to the county level for purposes of fast tracking. That's my opinion.
Okay. What was your intervention?
Now I even have two. Number one is that there are 47 county governments and one national government. There are 48 county government, 48 governments in the country. There are two levels of government that should be relating, and there is also intergovernmental relations, which happens between the two levels. Then again, lower than that, there are also actors within these governments, herein the county governments, the county assemblies. Today we're having a devolution conference, which the county assemblies are very well sidelined in terms of their role. And I'm saying that because...
what's been sidelined?
The county assemblies. And even other actors with the same ambit of devolution. Dr. Kithinji is talking about cooperation, coordination and cooperation that should happen between the two levels. But this discussion needs also to start at the at the level of the counties and also at the level between national and the counties. I'm saying that because if we do not have that conversation, we have a situation now, as the devolution conference is starting, where there is no voice of the county assemblies. There is no voice of actors who are practitioners. We have the good national actors, but there is no voice of even the chief officers. I have not seen any one of them in that program. I have not seen the voice of deputy governors in that program. I have not seen the voice of county secretaries, county attorneys, public service boards. That conversation needs to be strengthened so that we marry between the practitioners and the idealists, because of course donor world and the CSOs and the people who help fund these things will talk from an idealist point of view. Walter and his colleagues will talk about a practitioning point of view. Assemblies will now come and talk from a legislative point of view, an oversightal point of view, and that kind of discussion. And I think moving forward, devolution was supposed to be more inclusive. It was supposed to bring more services to the people, and that is not happening 10 years after this. And that conversation needs to be broadened so that when you now sit, it's not really about national and county only, but even the other players within the devolution sector.
Interesting contributions. I want us to take a look at the feedback. I mean, it's 8 a.m. We're out of time, but let's take a look at the feedback that has come to us. Citizen TV Kenya, Sam Gichuku, the hashtag to use is daybreak. Your concerns about the various topics we've spoken about. Lillian Sioi says that I think it would be okay if we sort out the IBC agenda first. For the other agenda, a full constitution convention be organized to deliberate on constitutional changes. She's talking about earlier conversation on 1 year after elections. Engineer Lazaro, 1 year after election, leaders who are supposed to unite the nation are still busy addressing rallies on top of vehicles. Growth of the economy stagnated by unending negative politics. The nation is still in ethnic campaign mode. Okay. Kiptoo Ruto, Azimio's attempt to dictate terms of discourse to Kenya Kwanza members raises questions of their intent. Instead of imposing their will, they could leverage their convictions to outwit opponents. The government's goodwill shouldn't be pretexts for control. All right. Amaganga Mustaf, corruption and tribalism or clanism is evident in our counties. This year's devolution conference should help present a workable strategy to streamline inclusivity for purposes of a competent county government. Brian Chamoa, granting greater fiscal autonomy to counties empowers them to generate and manage their own revenue, reducing their dependence on central government funding. This can be achieved through revenue sharing arrangements and taxation powers. Oh, okay. I thought taxation is the mandate of the national government. Godi Barazawere, devolution will be successful if governors will be sticking to the CIDPs that they come up with for the 5 years. Any slight deviation from the laid down CIDP will translate to failure. And the devolution conference kicks off today, but I think the official opening is tomorrow, is it? It's tomorrow. By the president?
Yes.
Great. So allow me to thank you all. I know there is more that you'd have wanted to add to this contribution, to this conversation, but we'll continue to listen and talk about the progress made, the challenges experienced. But the chairperson here, Kithinji Kiragu, tells us that work is being done to see what functions need to be transferred, how much of budget should accompany them, and that is a process that should be finalized by the IBEC, that is Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council. All right. Thank you all. Kithinji Kiragu is the chairperson of the Intergovernmental Technical Relations Committee. Chege Maora is the Secretary General, County Assemblies Forum. And Walter Okello is the Chief Officer, Water and Environment, and many other issues in Siaya County. Dr. Kanyuthi Mutunga is the chairperson of the Agriculture Committee at the National Assembly, but also the Member of Parliament for Tigania West. Thank you for making time for us. My name is Sam Gituku. See you again some other time. Bye for now.
Thank you.